Here,
Yeah, I'm in trouble now.
It's 2:27 in the morning on a Saturday night in Austin.
WorldRider, the podcast edition. Podcasting. Who would have ever thought? Hi, I'm Alan Carl, and welcome to the Journeys with WorldRider podcast. Man, do I have a story for you today. Hey, if you've been hanging around this podcast or this channel for any time at all, you know the algorithm has no idea what to do with me. Because at one moment I could be riding motorcycles in Bolivia, the next eating injera in Ethiopia, or maybe tasting wine in Albania, and then music, showing you and the people who make it. Or maybe I'm talking to the stray cats of Cyprus. And now I'm talking about a little roadhouse in Austin, Texas. And honestly, good. Damn the algorithm. I don't care. Because this channel has really never been about motorcycles, about travel, about food. It's about connection. And it's about curiosity. And sometimes curiosity leads you somewhere very unexpected. And for me, one of those places was Sam's Town Point in Austin, Texas. And one of the voices was Ramsay Midwood.
I'm bound for Reno, like a two-pump chump and a double-clutching weasel. I'm a mystical man of sorrow, drowning in my sea of care. Say my gun fires a mambo, my gun fires a rainbow, my gun fires a tang and the firefly.
For the last 5 or 6 years, I keep hearing Ramsay Midwood on some of my favorite internet radio stations. You know, those deep cut stations where sometimes something just cuts through and you stop, make your head turn, and say, wait a minute, who is this guy? That voice, the band, the guitar playing, those lyrics, sometimes sharp, sometimes funny, and even a little heartbreaking. They're kind of like crooked snapshots from the roadsides and the homes of America. The more I listened, the more curious I became. So I started digging, hunting down his music. It wasn't that easy. Looking at old YouTube videos, searching articles written about this guy. And then along the way I learned that Ramsay Midwood owned the legendary roadhouse, some people might call it a dive bar, deep in Austin, Texas, called Sam's Town Point. And even better, that he plays there most every week. And for years I kept telling myself, and everyone who listened, one day I'm gonna go to Austin and see this guy. 5 years of one day. And then recently, the end of last year, I realized that I was just a few thousand miles short of getting my United Airlines status. So I figured, instead of doing what some people do and do one of those mileage runs where they fly somewhere and turn around and come right back, I wanted to make this mean something. I wanted to finally go to Austin and see Ramsay Midwood live. So I flew to Austin, walked into Sam's Town Point, and immediately I knew the place was different. Pool tables, yeah. Cold beer, yeah. Cute little nooks tucked everywhere. Outdoor terraces and hanging out places. Strong margaritas. People dancing, crowded, packed dance floor, the two-step, and a dog wandering around the stage. Really. No manufactured cool. Just music. People, real people, good music. It's been a South Austin institution since 1981. Tucked off a side road off Slaughter Lane, deep into a residential corner of the city. If you didn't know about it, you would never know it was there unless somebody took you there. Some places just feel like themselves, and Sam's Town Point absolutely does. And I think that's what's kept it alive for all these years. Frankly, Austin doesn't have many places like that left anymore. Now let me tell you about Ramsay Midwood. First of all, he was born in Woodstock, New York. Yeah, that Woodstock, New York. But he was really raised in Northern Virginia, outside Washington, D.C. His father actually went to college on a music scholarship, but found out his real passion was writing. He was a novelist, a poet, a Guggenheim Fellow, and he won the Robert Frost Award for poetry. And his mother? Yeah, his mother was an artist, a painter. Creativity wasn't just in Ramsay's house, it hung in the air. Ramsay starts in theater, acting, graduates from James Madison University, and lands in Chicago with the legendary Steppenwolf Theater Company. Then somewhere along the way, the guitar takes over. He heads west to Los Angeles, plays gigs, records songs, puts out an album, starts creating a following, is in the scene, and then his apartment building burns down. Now, people that had been listening and liking his record had been sending him emails from all over, but there was a particular part in Texas that he seemed to be getting a lot of them, San Antonio and Austin. And he looked at that place and said, people like what I'm doing down there. So rather than rebuilding from the charred ruins of his LA life, he asked himself, why wouldn't I go there? And in Austin, he takes a wrong turn on his way to a Super Bowl party and runs into Sam's Town Point. Signs up for open mic and then does another. Soon, the owner offers him a regular gig, a residency. I think it was Wednesday nights. That was 2002. By 2017, Ramsay owned the place. This musician, who wandered in after taking a wrong turn, became the guy carrying the torch for one of the last real music joints in Austin. Not a bar owner, not a businessman, just a musician who took a wrong turn and never left. So before I headed down there, I sent an email to Ramsay to a generic email address for Sam's Town Point. And surprisingly, Ramsay answered. We exchanged a few more emails, and he says, come on down. So I flew out in December, caught the whole show. And after the set, I introduced myself. No camera, no microphone. Just a fan having a beer with a guy he has listened to for years. We talked. He was open, real, zero pretense. And somewhere along that conversation, I said to him, I'd love to come back to Austin and sit down with you have you as a guest on this podcast. And he said, sure. When? So about a month later, I went back to Austin, this time with camera and a microphone. And that night, the bar was packed. The whole dance floor was moving together, everybody two-stepping. The band was rocking, the beers flowing, margaritas. And the one thing I immediately loved about Ramsay is he shares the spotlight. Every member of his band gets their moment. And that tells you a lot about a person. And then after the set at 1 or maybe it was 2 in the morning, Ramsay and I sat down in a dark corner of Sam's Town Point and started talking. We had a lot to talk about his journey. Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, his father the poet, and that wrong turn that changed everything. And this little roadhouse in South Austin that almost got lost and didn't. That's the kind of story that I look for and I live for. Now, I've been sitting on this interview for a few months, maybe overthinking it, polishing it too much, maybe letting perfect get in the way of sharing something really great. This conversation needs to be shared, ready or not. And somewhere along my journey to Austin, I think I made a friend. In fact, I'm already planning to go back to Sam's Town Point later this summer. And that should tell you something. So welcome to Sam's Town Point. And welcome to my interview with Ramsay Midwood. Enjoy.
I'm in trouble now. It's 2:27 in the morning on a Saturday night in Austin.
At a place called Sam's Town Point with Ramsay Midwood.
And if you've never heard of Ramsay Midwood, I hope by the time our little conversation is, you're going to be fascinated and curious, and you're going to go right out and start listening to Ramsay Midwood. And I'm going to tell you how I found him. I found him listening to a strange internet radio station called Bootlicker, and it's part of the Soma FM little entourage of internet radio stations. And the first time I heard it, I said, holy shit, this is J.J. Cale. Or at least it sounded a hell of like J.J. Cale. So then I had the deep dive, and I went in and I tried to find everything I could about this man, Ramsay Midwood. And he's got a really long story. We're not going to get into the whole journey of that, but hey, thanks for joining us on this. I don't know where this is going to end up, but it'll end up somewhere.
Well, great to meet you.
Good to meet you, man. I will come back and see you guys again. As said, I needed to just make a trip. I don't know why it took me so long.
Well, you're not many people know about it, but just enough to fill up the place.
I mean, it was a pretty good crowd between when I first met you, but tonight was much bigger.
Yeah, it's a little more lively.
Yeah.
Cold weather, people want to be inside.
Yeah, inside. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so you've, without getting into a whole journey, but I want to say it's too late. You grew up in Arlington, or in Virginia.
In Virginia.
In North Virginia, I guess. And I believe your parents, was it your mom or who played music?
My dad played music.
Your
He was a tuba. He had a sousaphone scholarship to I think it was the University of Miami, and then my mother went to the University of Miami as well, and she was a painter. And,
Okay.
But my father was also as a writer. I think he ended up. That was his passion, was writing.
Was writing for Esquire, right?
He wrote for Esquire,
Yeah.
Paris Review, and a bunch of those kind of, in the literate
A little more
times.
literary than,
Theater, and I loved it. That's where I discovered the power of the theater.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I remember, or when I was younger, I went to see Marcel Marceau at the Kennedy Center when I was maybe 14 or 15. And I sort of went not knowing, my parents kind of drug me to the Kennedy Center. And I just, at the very end of it, I still at the end there was this silence, and then the entire place erupted, you couldn't even believe it. It was just the whole place was so moved, everybody in the place was moved, and myself included. And I just kind of remember being really the strength of one guy.
Yeah, and it is one.
Cause it's an old thing, but it's a soul thing, but it's a real thing.
It is one guy.
Just one guy, and that's it. And what he was able to convey. I mean, it was just. And then recently, I didn't really, at that point, I didn't go, well, I'm going to go study what, it was just a very powerful moment for me. And then you realize what he went through in France with the Nazis and everything, and you realized, oh man, that guy really had a story to tell, and maybe could only tell it through by not saying anything,
by silence. Yeah.
And that ultimately was the spirit that won, was pretty powerful. And then I remember being maybe in San Francisco, and my folks took me to the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, which I think was Danny Elfman, and they did a play, and then there was a woman who took her shirt off. She was a mermaid, and she was just naked, and I was like, oh my God, how do I get involved in this deal? That's what I'm looking for. And then senior year in high school, I was running track, and I was just running in circles down the thing, and it's like, I hate this. This is terrible. And there was an audition for a play, You Can't Take It With You. And just as I was running by, I just kept running by, and I could hear them auditioning in there. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go walk. And I went in there in my sweats and auditioned and got the role of Mr. DePenna. I liked the theater for a while there. And then I went to college, and I just realized I really loved it. And I studied in London for a while. I saw a lot of the Royal Shakespeare Company stuff, and fringe stuff, and just loved it. Couldn't even believe it was real, And then you would go you would see a play, and then you go to the pub or the bar, and all the actors are sitting around drinking, whatever, carrying on, and just sort of seemed like they carried themselves with this regal bearing that was very elusive for me to possess at the time. And I saw that True West that Steppenwolf did, Gary Sinise and John Malkovich, and the Sam Shepard play, and I saw that, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, that was really, really strong. So I ended up, at some point, about of friends I did theater with in college moved to Chicago and started working with the Steppenwolf Theater, and they were doing Tom Waits, Frank's Wild Years.
Oh,
they
Frank.
were doing that play, and so they were, and Tom Waits, to us was like, he was a great musician, just loved all the songs and everything he did. And when I found out that my pals were all doing that, I just left school immediately and went straight to Chicago, and I started working in little theaters there, and then eventually got to work with Steppenwolf and understudied Gary Sinise and
Oh, wow.
Grapes of Wrath, and had to play Floyd Knowles, a labor agitator. But that was also, there was a lot of music in that, and I went go to the library and kind of study that period, and there was all kinds of great source material there, and all these cowboy songs, and
Then somehow music found you.
Well, I think it's funny. In college, I started playing music and guitar and learning songs, and I had made this movie that I really liked called Joe's Rotten World, and it was I got to play Joe, and it was a tour de force kind of thing, and I actually incorporated a song from that shootout at the OK Chinese restaurant, which I hadn't made yet, but it was a song that I liked, the dreary life. The Cowboy's life is a very dreary life. I sort of put it into the movie, and then the movie was rejected by this festival and rejected by that festival, and I was like, this is a pretty funny movie. I don't get why it's being rejected. I just didn't get it because it was silly, but it was so perfect. It was like a perfectly low budget, funny film, but it couldn't find a home. And then I met somebody who was like, hey, we're doing this film festival called Slam Dance. Do you want to be in it? I was like, and I talked to the director. I said, let's be in this weird festival, and we'll just go up and we'll say, hey, look, we're doing our own festival up here in Utah. What do you think about that? And so we did. It was Dan Mervish and Shane Coon and John Fitzgerald and Peter Baxter, a bunch of people that I think are still working with that festival, and we just went up there and we made this festival and whatever, show the film. And then I liked the idea of the festival, so I sort of adhered myself to that festival for the next year and helped form that and develop relationships with people, and just that wasn't that. I was drinking too much too. I was in Hollywood, and I was just like, whatever. I didn't behave very well. I had done a bunch of television shows, and they always sort of, cast you as some terrible person, or some terrible thing. And at some point I was like, what am I doing? Why am I mean, it's kind of fun, whatever. Some of it is. But it's so few and far between, and there's hardly any money. It's just like a weird life. I just had this guitar, and I was like, oh, I like this better. And I just sort of veered off, and I just shed the film ambition and all of that stuff, and just was like, I don't care, whatever. And that was more fun. I started kind of like a dual interest, I guess. And then you realize with acting in that you don't have much control over, unless you're Marcel Marceau, I guess, and you're going to go around doing it. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But with music, you could just kind of control it more, and it was more fun and lively, and I just liked it, and just said, I'm just going to put the other thing aside and focus on playing music with people. And I'd written these songs, and the songs would just kind of lead you to different places and people, and I started meeting great musicians in California, and I started meeting people I really liked, and that were smart. And it's got Jamie Cohen, who was an artist, and it was an A&R guy for A&M, and but I didn't meet him in that sort of there's an A&R. It was just like a natural, and he was just a great person, very encouraging. And then I started making these demo tapes, and then I said, well, I'm going to take this demo tape here and there, and I just kind of wandered around like a vagabond with this guitar and these ideas. And
Did you start writing right away,
Yeah.
or did you start didn't go down to that cover thing? You just
No, I just started writing. I never understood at first. I mean, now I do. Now I love it. But back then it was like, why would I want to cover a bunch of songs? I want to do my own songs. I got all these ideas and stuff. Eventually met Randy Weeks, and who was a great songwriter and guitar player, and he sort of took a liking to the songs and what I was doing, and his band was dissolving, and we just started playing music together. And they said, hey, I know this guy, he's got this tape machine, we should go over and record. But a bunch of people are like, hey, let's record this, and all these people kind of like going, we like that stuff. But with Randy, he and I had a very sympathetic idea of what sounded good. And this guy Charlie McGovern from Salinas, who's a great engineer, we got together and we just started making this record at Kip Boardman's house. And it just had this, I hated what was happening in music so much in that period. It was that Woodstock 99 and the all that crap, all the sort of mean-spirited, even I was not my favorite Nirvana song was the Lead Belly song, Where'd You Sleep Last Night? And I thought, that guy was getting back to, he was leaving the rape me and all the nonsense.
Yes.
And all that hateful, I was really hateful to me. I just thought it was like, and jumping around, look at me, and Mama Monster, and all of that stuff. It was like, that doesn't seem like, I like guys like Jimmy Driftwood and Mississippi John Hurt, guys that were sort of singing and more about what was, I don't know. They seemed to have an emotional connection to it that wasn't
the human condition.
Very human.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Driftwood in particular was also very political, but in a probably more dangerous. The music that he championed was more dangerous than all these people that pretending to sing dangerous songs, but they were really just encouraging people to do drugs and ruin their lives. Is really what it was to me. Anyway, so we were making this stuff, and it was really like it was antithetical to what was going on in the popular culture at the time. We weren't trying to make popular. We were just trying to make something that sounded good and that was meaningful, without any sort of ambition. As this thing is going to take us anywhere other than we're here already. We are doing what we want to do. We don't have to get anywhere. We're not trying to do anything with it. We're here. We've made it because we're doing it.
Because you're able to do what
we're
you
able
want
to
to
do
do.
it. We're doing it. Everything else is nonsense. And
Now some folks might say that I'm no good,
and at some point, Jimmy Driftwood had passed away, and I had made half that record, and I was like, well, why isn't this national news? What is I saw it in the No Depression. There was a little blurb about Jimmy Driftwood's having and I was like, well, I'm getting in the car and I'm going to drive to Arkansas and be part of that. And I called them. I said, hey, my name's Ramsay Midwood, and I was wondering if I could come down to that thing. And they said, oh yeah, whatever you want to do, that's fine. I said, all right. And they said, do you want to play a song? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll play a song, and I drove all the way down there. Had this little group of half, like some cassettes of half of that record that I made that I would sell along the way, and I bought a Volkswagen from a stuntman who was giving up the trade, and he was like, and I took it, and then I knew I could resell it in Chicago because I knew a guy. The stuntman said, it's the brushes on the generator, and I said, the what on the what? I said, oh, yeah, you might need to replace the brushes on it. I said, oh, whatever, I'll be fine. And then, halfway home, or halfway to, I was like, I don't know, it's not starting. And I called my friend, he said, it might be the brushes on the generator. I was like, oh, no. And, but I could kind of push start it and get her going there for a while. Once it was going, it was going. And I got to Arkansas, and I did the thing, and it was like a celebration of his life, and all these people came in, and there was this sort of abandoned farm, the rack and sack players, would go, and it was kind of like he was the guy, and now he was no longer there, and didn't seem like there was anyone sort of going to take the reins or anything, but it was still, this great there was a great music shop in there, and the spirit was there. Everyone was singing on the streets, and it was like so great.
Wow.
And then I, anyway, so then I, that was done, and I started to drive up to Chicago, and then when I got to Chicago, but I ended up trying to record some song at this studio. And then I recorded. I'd written a new song, and he says, "Oh yeah, you know where they'll like you is Wisconsin," meaning that maybe they don't like you so much here in Chicago, but in Wisconsin they're going to really like you. And so I drove to Wisconsin, and I said, "Oh, this will be fun," and sure enough, they did. It was like I ran into all these weird people, and the next thing you know, I was on the radio, and
oh wow,
it was crazy. Yeah, I'll tell you, that's a very long and funny story, but.
That's amazing, though.
But yeah. So then, whatever. So like I made the record, and then it ended up at KCRW, and Nick Harcourt liked it, and then people started really showing up at the Cinema Bar where we were playing, and then Vanguard picked up the record. Then I had a house fire, and then I had to make a decision about whether I was going to just rebuild there, or so just get the hell out of and come here. And I came here.
And what was it about Austin that
I don't know.
it just was on the
It
map?
just seemed like, you know what? Because it was I could get you get your first data, because I started getting emails from people that liked the record, and so it was like, I get a lot of emails from Houston, a lot of emails from Dallas, and a lot of emails from San Antonio and Austin. And I just looked, and I was like, there's their little zone. They seem to like what I'm doing. Why wouldn't I go there and play? It just seems better and cheaper at the time.
Yeah.
And so I just made the move, and I couldn't be happy. I moved here in 2001, 2002, and had a record deal, and but I had a band in California. But when I came here, I didn't have a band, and so I was just kind of floating around, looking for odd gigs here and there, and it was kind of rough for me to find the kind of a band.
Yeah.
And so you're always looking for a spot. Like in California, I found this place called the Cinema Bar, and that was like a little kind of dive, and we just started playing there, and we figured, if it was good, people would start showing up, and so we just kept playing there, and then at some point it became this great scene over there with people like Mike Stinson and
Wow.
Randy Weeks, and Kip Boardman, and Tony Gilkison, and Don Heffy. It was just whatever, this whole cool scene kind of developed there in that little spot. And so when I came here, there really wasn't anything like that. And then one day I was just riding around, going to a friend's house, and I got lost and saw the spot. It's like, this seems like nobody really knows about it. It seems tucked away, and they're trying to get people to show up. They were like an open mic, but it was a private club, but they were getting rid of the private club because I think they were having a hard time getting business. And so I just kind of came in for that open mic and started playing. And next thing I knew, we had a gig, a regular, why don't you play here regular? And I started playing, and folks started showing up, and I started picking and choosing between, kind of put a band together. And then South by Southwest was happening, and a lot of people coming through town, and Penny and Wally sort of let me have a run of the place and just bring in bands, because all of a sudden they had business, because, and they were thrilled. And then at some point there was so many people with, there was the new social media world, and people were filming, and, bands with cell phones and sort of sharing this content with people, and just basically ruining anything that they had actually accomplished in real life. Here you really played in front of all these people, and they all were moved, and people were dancing, and it was fun and lively. And then you take this little snippet and you put it on the thing, and you can't hear anything. It looks diminished, and you see it on a computer. And anyway, and so I was like, I'm gonna if we're gonna have these bands and all stuff, let's record it properly. And I found a tape machine, and started to sort of mic it up, and was going to do a whole series like Manchaca Live, like Manchaca City Limits or something, and just kind of treat the bands that I liked with some courtesy and give them the kind of
Give them some notoriety.
yeah. And help them, like, here's a great sounding thing and a great looking thing. And as I was doing that, Wally, the guy who was really, this was his spot. He really loved it, and he died on a motorcycle accident. And Penny, who was here, had already lost a son years before that, and so I was like, oh, I'm not gonna. We'll just kind of put our thing on the back burner.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, you go ahead and do it. And I was like, I don't. And yes. Anyway, we ended up. She wouldn't hear it. She was like, you do it. And so I did it. And I think ever since then, I sort of had a bond with her about this place, and because I had the same feelings about it that Wally had. And that's basically the spiritual. But it just, I know Penny. She just she wanted to see this place, kind of like how Wally wanted to see it. Just a place where people in the area would get together and just. He wanted a live music venue, and it was kind of like, would it sort of almost be a music venue, and then different things would happen. But now it is that. It is that.
Yes.
If you think you're fooling anybody, you gotta get out of your mind. 'Cause I know you're having a hard time. That's not your thing, hard time.
Yeah, so it has evolved into a legendary, maybe Wally's vision.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, we've had Tony Joe White played here, all kinds of fancy, Willis Allen Ramsey, Kinky Fried, all these like legends of music, have ended up coming through here. Ramblin' Jack Elliott.
Really?
Yeah. It just got, and I think they like, this is like, I got another guy, Earl Poole Ball, used to play with Johnny Cash, played here a lot. And he said, musicians, you start out playing in bars and you end up playing in bars. And I think people feel comfortable playing here because sound is so good and a lot of care in that. And that's kind of one thing that a lot of people that are in the music business and have these venues everywhere, they think about everything but like what it sounds like. And I never, and here I think it really does sound good.
It really does.
Ceilings and with wood floor, and the Bill does such a great job.
You can tell there is soul and spirit here, for sure. And the music, it does sound great. Now actually, because last time I got here a little late, I didn't see this act.
Jen Miori.
Yeah.
Wasn't she great?
Oh, she was fantastic.
Something like that. I remember having a gig at the Troubadour. And I said, oh, man, I'm going to play at the Troubadour, man. That's going to be it. We'll really show everybody then. And then it was like, why isn't there anybody here? It's like, oh, I guess it's not the venue itself, but the people. I mean, nowadays, I think that's what you have to do. I think you have to, I mean, really, or just develop, like, do a thing and have people like it. And then, because you can kind of broadcast it now. I mean, those companies like YouTube and whatever, they can throttle and keep people from, they can slow the spread. They can stop the spread. They can put a mask.
They can.
They can put a mask on
control
your
that, yeah.
profile or whatever, and you could share something, and 1,000 or whatever, 100 people in your thing would be like, man, that's great. I'm going to share it, and then you'll see those 100 people when they go to see, like, oh, no one liked it. On their point of view, because
right.
They got thrown. So they they don't amplify it, and so it kind of, there was the promise of it being a meritocracy, but it was quickly subverted by
the big
guy, the big music.
Guy. Yeah.
When we got the jukebox, it was a great sort of you got to really meditate on how that used to work and how that business model was, and that it was the jukebox machine, right? You put it in the bar, and then you'd have to populate it with records, right?
Yep.
And then there would be a guy who would show up with a bunch of records that would be like in his trunk or whatever, and say, put this on. This is really important that you put this on, but at some point you would get the information like, well, that record, nobody puts a nickel in there.
Right.
Nobody puts a nickel in it for that. But man, I'll tell you one that does get all the nickels is, whatever.
Yep. Yep.
And so there's this information or data.
Yeah.
The primitive data of the jukebox. Linda Gale Lewis, Jerry Lee Lewis's sister, comes in here and plays, and she was at she was at ground zero for like everything that was cool in the world.
Yeah.
She'll play here once a month on a Tuesday, and she if we get her seal of approval, we're thrilled.
Yeah.
She's great. She's very special, and it's funny because Jerry Lee Lewis is just kind of like whatever, like I'm gonna kill everybody and love her, whatever, hard drinking, drugs, and she's not like that. She's very like sweet, but there's this kind of like strength that whole family has. And then sometimes she'll be playing and you just see, all of a sudden some kind of muse will take over, and you'll see that even, Jerry Lee Lewis was probably possessed by the same thing. One time Matt Farrell was playing. It was the night after Jerry Lee Lewis died. And so and this is Matt who plays with me. Something happened, where he was playing a shake, rattle, and roll, and a whole lot of shaking going on. And he was playing with a little band, and at some point, like, I don't know, in the middle of the song, you just sensed that it wasn't really Matt that was playing anymore, that there was this thing that was like being like channeled, like it was like something that was like pretty crazy. And he finished, and he was kind of like in a sweat afterwards, and kind of there was only maybe 4 people in here watching, but everybody in the band just like at the end of it was like frozen. What did we just see here? What just happened?
I'm looking for Heather, have you seen her? I'm looking for Heather, have you seen her?
And Matt was kind of coming to, and there was a guy named Matt Giles who was playing, and he's like, I'm not going to play anything after that. Nobody wanted to play. It was like, no, we're all good. And then so I don't know, it's weird. And so that was a couple of years ago, and then Linda Gale kind of just somehow stumbled in here, and I just think that certain places kind of have a certain magnetism, or there's a certain thing in
it's an energy.
It's an energy, and even there was just, this place has always kind of got its, I don't know if it's because it's where it is and where the wind and the stuff blows and where all the creeks and stuff are, but there's something that's like pretty great about it. It's in a weird vortex. Yeah. It just is. And anybody, well, that's not a very uncommon occurrence sometimes, around here, where and people, people are like, oh, I don't know. That's where the wealth. We were talking about, I think, wealth and what money and wealth, and that people mistake money for wealth. And I always felt like with that, I felt like very wealthy. That I got to see that, and that's just one of about 1,000 experiences like that here. When there'll be nobody in the room, and you're just lucky that you're there because that's what else you got.
What we've got, yeah.
This is what we got.
This is what we got. And you know what? I'd like to always say, saying this is not a dress rehearsal,
right?
So so live.
Yeah. This is what you got. Bill Murray comes in here every once in a while, and I remember hearing him say that one time too, because he would say that to his brother. He would say, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is what we got, and that was always, that had an effect on me. That statement. But he was also rescued by a painting, which I thought was great. That he was on the verge of some tragic decision that fortunately he didn't make, but he saw. I'm trying to think what the painting was. It was in Chicago. It was in Chicago. It was the Chicago Art Institute. I think it was like a woman in the field cutting hay or something. I wish I could think of it offhand. And it was just the strength of that person in that situation that he saw that somebody had painted. Just somebody like, I'm just going to paint this painting, and but that has such a profound effect. And there's so many things like that pieces of things that you create that are last beyond your life. And maybe, you know, I don't know, it's pretty cool.
That is, and that is what the legacy. What do you leave behind is, you know.
But right, who would think like, oh, I painted this painting. I really needed to paint this painting, and they're going to put it in a museum, and then Bill Murray's going to come and look at it and decide like I'm going to keep living, and then make whatever. I don't know. It's just funny, and my dad wrote a lot of poems, you know, and every once in a while I'll read it and I'll just start weeping, you know, and then I'll share it with other people, and they'll have a similar sort of thing, and I say, wow, my dad is alive in there, and like his ability to kind of string words to kind of create this unspoken thing that everybody feels, but they don't know how to like touch it or talk about it, but he's able to like, hey, I got that feeling, that's the same impenetrable truth that we're all sort of grappling with. Penny was the only one who ever read my dad's novels. Hardly any of my friends have ever read it.
And what was your dad's name?
Barton Midwood.
Barton?
He's got a book called Phantoms and World in Pieces, and Phantoms is a group of short stories, and Bodkin is a novel that he wrote, and you can kind of go online and see his kind of snarky essays in Esquire and stuff. But also just a great poet and interesting.
What are you most proud of?
My kids.
There you go.
I mean, that's it. I mean, really, it is. I got three, really four. My son's out in California, and my daughter's out in California, going to school. The other working very hard at 3 jobs, and Hudson at home, who's just the funniest person I ever met. It's just great. And then I have a daughter, Clara. Let's see, 11, Hudson. 18, and 25.
Okay.
And then 32, I think. 30
for
33.
Clara.
Yeah.
When you approach, say, writing a song, or you know, I don't know if it just comes to you. Do you write lyrics first, or do you write the song?
Not together. Always together.
Always together.
Always at the same time. And
then, do you, as you're working on, say, this new album and the last album, are you trying to go for a sound, or do you?
No, I think the sound is always just sort of emerges with whoever is in your band and the relationship that you have. You know, I don't think you can, like, I'm going for this or I'm going for that. I mean, some people do that. I can never do that. I'm always like, because it's that's why I think recording together in a live situation like here is so great, because it's kind of a conversation that you're overhearing, and that's all the records that I like for the most part are like sort of born of that, where they just emerge. You know, it wasn't like, you know, we're gonna do this.
Do you record live? Is that how you do it?
Yeah. We just, like, that record was just pretty much always live. Yeah. Really quick. So Matt Farrell, you know, I was writing a song and I used the phrase teeny genie, and he goes, "Oh, that's how I learned how to play the organ." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "The organ, teeny genie. Is that what you're talking about?" I said, "No, I was just making up words or something." And he was like, "Oh no, I learned to." And this little Lowry organ is kind of like a little tiny thing, and I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And he goes, "Yeah, that's where I learned." And so the next day I saw one for sale, and I was like, it was like $100 or something like that. So I was like, "Oh, I'll buy it for Matt and be a surprise, you know." And I said, "Hey Matt, I got you something." And he went back in the chill zone or whatever, and I said, "Check this out." And he was like, "What?" And he said, "This is like the one I had as a kid." And he sat down and he started playing, and I was like, "Man," I said, "Matt, let's make a record for you where it's where all the songs start on the teeny genie, which is this real intro. Like and then we'll expand it and make these bigger songs out of it." And he said, "Well, whatever, if you want to do it." And then my friend Jonathan Tyler was living back there, and he had a little studio, and I said, "Hey Johnny, you want to help us with this thing?" And he said, we started doing these songs, and we made like 7 songs, I think, and they're all great. And then a friend of mine who's a filmmaker said, "Oh, we should make some videos." We made one video for one, and then he had an idea where he would, like, because of the genie we'd have a genie and it would grant these wishes, and they became these little videos, and so it's kind of a series of funny videos that are sort of loosely based on his discovery of a genie. But really, it was like his father. At some point, it was an instrumental, and Matt was like, "Why don't you go ahead and say something over this instrumental thing?" And I was like, "No, I don't think I should say anything over it. I think it's your record. You should say something." And so he tells this great story about his dad buying him this teeny genie, and the way he tells the story is really, 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 honest. And so that was the first video, was like him telling that story while, there's a little scene of young Matt getting the teeny genie from his dad, and which is funny because it's really it's the one, and then later he discovers a genie, and he makes these other wishes. But the first wish that came true was the one that his dad, provided for him, which I thought was great. Like, here's that's a real wish. You can grant. You don't have to have a genie. You can just be a good dad.
Well, awesome. What a great ending to the story. And we can see that?
Yeah, it's on the internet.
Okay.
Matt Farrell and the Teeny Genie.
Matt Farrell and the Teeny Genie, and I'll put links in the description of this.
Great.
Yeah,
that's a great.
Yeah, well, thank you, man.
Sure.
I'll be back, and we'll
sure.
do,
Why
we'll,
wouldn't
do,
you?
we'll do a part 2 or 3. It's good. This is good.
Can you bring Morgan?
Yeah, Morgan.
Now some folks might say that I'm no good.
WorldRider, the podcast edition.